This video will cover debate tactics, what to do or not do in a debate. This is by no means an all-inclusive list. This is just some things that I can think of that have worked for me. The first one I'll cover is this. If someone has to resort to ad hominem attacks, they got nothing. If they had anything, they'd say it. Calling somebody stupid does not disprove what they said. Disproving what they said disproves what they said. Also, if someone goes ad hominem, they've lost, not you. Now don't expect them to come out and say, I made an ad hominem attack, so therefore I lost. This may just be a victory that you have to celebrate by yourself, but just know that you won. If they had something to say, they would have said it. Now I'd like to go over a couple of ad hominems that get used on me either here on YouTube or in real life. Here's an example. That guy named Tariq who does the Mac Lessons radio show, he was debating a black female on the show, and they were discussing different things like, black women being self-hating because they perm or dye their hair. And then the black woman got offended and started talking about black men's flaws. So they went back and forth trading gender insults for a while, until Tariq asked that one question that's meant to stop a woman dead in her tracks. Do you have a man? And unfortunately, the woman made the mistake of answering the question. Unless you are debating about good relationship advice or something like that, then whether or not you have a man is irrelevant. So don't answer the question whether you're single, married, got a boyfriend, or whatever else. Now I say this because you cannot win regardless of your answer. If you say no, they'll say, aha, and run with it. If you say yes, they won't believe you. They'll either say, no you don't, or they'll follow up with a battery of questions. What does he do? What does he look like? What is this? And that's exactly what happened to the woman on Tariq's show. She said she did have a man, and he said, no you don't. So unless you can point to your man, don't say that you have a man even if you do. But even then, I still wouldn't answer the question, because after that it'll be, well, what does he do? Does he have a degree? Well, he ain't all that fine. They'll commence to trying to tear him down. So trust me, you cannot win on that question no matter what you say. Not only is this question a backhanded ad hominem attack, it's also a red herring. Now, instead of talking about the issue at hand, they've got you on the run defending yourself. Do not give them opportunities to force you to have to defend yourself. Defend your position, but you don't have to defend yourself, and especially not from ad hominem attacks. Ladies, if a man asks you if you have a man during a debate, you can say something like, oh, I didn't know this was an interview, I thought this was a debate. Well, if you want to get to know me, then I can introduce myself after this debate. I can tell you where I'm from, I can tell you who my daddy is. But right now the issue is, and just steer them right back into the issue. Another ad hominem-ish attack that people like to use in a debate is, do you have a degree? And there are variations on this, stuff like, have you traveled the world? How old are you? Stuff like that. Now these questions are relevant sometimes, but do not answer them if they're not. For example, if you're debating about the civil rights movement and your opponent is 60 years old and you're just 20 years old, then it would be relevant for them to ask you how old you are. Because you're debating a time period that they actually lived through, while you're only learning about it secondhand from books and movies and school and stuff. But if you're debating about cats and they're asking you how old you are, they don't need to know your age. They just need to state their disagreement with what you said and prove you wrong. Knowing about cats has nothing to do with your age. It has to do with how much you've read about them, or studied them, or lived with them. There are little kids who have expert knowledge on certain subjects. But anyway, moving on. If someone asks you if you have a degree, again, sometimes this is relevant. But sometimes people just ask you this to intimidate you. For example, if you're debating a doctor about cars and they ask you, do you have a degree? They're trying to intimidate you. If you're debating a psychologist about psychology, then that's a legitimate question, because you're debating someone who is an expert in their field, or at least considered to be. But even then, you should make them say what their disagreement is with what you're saying. If whether or not you have a degree is irrelevant, don't answer the question. Because if you answer the question, even if your answer is yes, then they'll go on to, well, what's your degree in, and what school did you get it from? On and on and on, until again you're off the subject and being forced to defend yourself. The next two things I want to cover is, don't let them force you to defend a position that you do not hold, or defend something that does not apply to you. And also, there are some cases where you want to give them an answer that you know they do not expect. And I have actual examples to illustrate these points. The first one is a comment that was posted on my racial hierarchy video. The guy writes, "I can help answer one question. Why do black men seek women of other races that aren't that great? Because anything is better, bitter, lonely, sad, video making women." I guess he meant better than. And then he ends his post with, "Oh, and they usually are child free." Actually, you know what? There are 3 points I can make with this comment. Number one, if you get a comment like this, or if you're in a debate and somebody says something like this, number one, remember what I said, it's ad hominem, so they don't have anything else. But on your end, what you want to do is avoid a knee-jerk / emotional response. It's obvious by this comment that this guy's trying to get at me. Black men are used to being able to push certain buttons to get black women to react. One of those buttons is that they assume that every black woman gets angry when she sees a black man with a non-black woman. And the other button is, especially since all these videos have been made lately about how black women can't find mates, that they can shut any black woman down by saying she's single and that therefore she's lonely and bitter. But anyway, when someone says something like this to you, avoid an emotional response. Next point, you do not have to defend anything that does not apply to you or that you do not believe in. The part where he writes, "Oh, and they usually are child free." Well, that's good for them, but I'm child free as well, so I don't have to defend that. I don't care if every other black woman in the world has a child. I don't, so I don't have to defend that. This guy probably wanted me to respond with something like, "Well, that's because black men abandon their children." If I had said that, I'm sure he would be ready to rip that apart. Because there are guys like Sergeant Willie Pete and Mr. Legend from Black Men Vent and even Tariq who have come up with good answers to criticisms that black women have against black men. The argument script has already been pre-written for him. All he needs me to do is give the right responses so he can tear me up. If I had given that expected response, he probably would have said something like, "Well, these black women are picking these men," or "Why are these black women letting these men get them pregnant without being married?" You know, any type of response that's going to put the spotlight back on black women. Now, it's not the spotlight being on black women that I have a problem with. The problem is that that particular video was not about black women. It was about the racial hierarchy. If you want to talk about black women, go to a video about black women. I've made videos about black women. Go to one of those and make these comments. But anyway, on to my next point. Give them an answer they don't expect. If you take them out of their element so that they can't use the talking points that they had made up beforehand, then you have a better chance of winning the exchange. So I let you read the comment that this guy left for me, and now here's my response. It's not emotional, I don't defend anything that doesn't apply to me, and it's not what he expected. That's another symptom of being on the bottom of the hierarchy, bragging about getting another race. Asian, white, or brown men do not do this. Did this guy respond to this particular comment? No, there was nothing he could say. He couldn't push either of those buttons he was used to being able to push, and he couldn't use one of his pre-written scripts. The last point I want to cover is using sympathy or trying to pull on heartstrings to win a debate. Sometimes during a debate, a person will bring up a certain point that if you do anything but wholeheartedly agree with it, it can make you look like an asshole. For example, when debating child support for single mothers, if a man were to say, "Well, I don't think I should have to pay a woman just because she has my baby," and then the woman will come back with something like, "Well, what about the child? Don't you want him to eat and have clothes and have a roof over his head?" Well, of course the man thinks that the child is entitled to all those things. He just doesn't think he should have to pay for it, but in saying that, it makes him sound like an asshole. But if these women are so concerned about the child, then they should have them inside of marriage. That way, if the man leaves you, your ass and the baby's ass is more covered. But anyway, that's all the debate tactics I can fit into this video. Oh, and by the way, if you happen to disagree with anything I said in this video, you can make a video response and show me where I'm wrong, or you can just ask me if I have a man. Either way.